step. Yep, wonderful. Two last points. If teams raise POIs and POIs wasn't taken before 6, please verbalize it and say you're a POI if judges missed it. So make sure that teams are forced to take POI and they reminded. And second, I'll be sharing my screen for timekeeping purposes. So if I don't start the timer, please don't stop. Also remind me as well. Without further ado, good luck to all the teams, and I call House to order. Prime Minister, whenever you're ready, we can start the debate.
Hello, my name is William Lee. I would like to. I have no gender pronouns. I would like to get my POIs via chat, and yeah, I'll get at least one of them. Okay, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so 3 things I would like to talk about in this speech. First of all, I would like to give a brief description and the definition of what we're going to talk about today, and I would like to conceptualize the world that we're living in, basically in South Korea, and how this dominance of prosperity gospels are actually coming in South Korea. And second, we would like to take this regret motion into the individual perspective. And finally, we're going to talk about the minorities who will be persecuted in this basic structure of dominance of prosperity gospels. So first of all, where are we living in? We're living in basically in South Korea, where South Korea has a very rigid hierarchical structure. So basically there's a big gap between the rich and the poor, between the majority and the minority. And also we believe that in South Korea, the descending of wealth from the majority people to their future generations is happening very commonly in this world we're living in. And also the dominance of prosperity gospel. So basically in the religious people's perspective, we believe that in the perspective of religious people, moral people are people who believe in God. And as the information slide has kindly informed us, that if you believe in God and if you have faith, if you do positive speech and donate in the causes for religion, that this will naturally increase your wealth. So that's the basic thing that we're living in. So the counterfactual of what we're going to prove to you today is that a world without dominance of this prosperity gospels in South Korea is much better than the current status quo that we're currently living in. So why? We're going to talk to you in the first of all the individual perspective that I have informed to you. So we're going to give a 2-level analysis about this. First of all, we're going to give an analysis about this in the wealthy person's perspective, and second, we're going to give an analysis of the people who don't have that enough wealth. So first of all, wealthy people's perspective. So we believe that the prosperity gospel is dominant in South Korea, then people who are wealthy and people who are born wealthy and people who get the privilege of the descending of wealth from their past generations, then we believe that they won't understand the privileges that they attain and that they enjoy in South Korea. Why is this so? So if they're wealthy, then if they're wealthy and the prosperity gospel is dominant in South Korea, then they'll naturally think that the reason why I have this wealth is because I had faith in God and I had positive speech toward God and I believe so much in God, and that's the reason why God had rewarded me these gifts. But that's not so. They're actually just getting the privileges from their past privileges and the wealth that they had descended from their past generations. So therefore, they wouldn't understand what they are actually living in, and therefore they will just enjoy and just attain and continue with these privileges along. And second, we're going to talk about people who don't have enough wealth. So people who basically are poor. So in the perspective of these poor people, if I don't have enough money, then then they will think that we believe that these people will shift the blame of their shallow depths of wealth into their contributions to religion rather than in their basic capabilities of living in society. So we believe that these people will not truly attain and will not truly endeavor in order to get much more wealth, like studying even more or like getting to their part-time jobs even more. We believe that they will actually shift the blame shallow depth of wealth, not into their capabilities or their ability in order to live and in order to get better skills, in order to survive and adapt in this rigid, hard environment of South Korea, but rather into the contributions to religion, whether they had faith, whether they did really make some positive speeches about their religion, or whether they really donated actually to these religious charities. So second of all, so the second point that we're going to talk about is basically about the minorities. So we're going to give the argument about the minorities into a two-level structure. So first of all, we're going to talk about minority bias, and second, we're going to talk about the whole structure. We're going to talk about the salvation of these minorities, and we're going to adapt the social structure of South Korea into the salvation into this argument. So first of all, the minority bias. So we believe that if the dominance of prosperity gospels continues in South Korea, then this will naturally lead to religious people naturally persecuting minorities. So why is that so? So according to the info slide, our prosperity theology is basically that if you have faith, if you did positive speech, or if you donated to these to God and to the Catholic Church, then you will get material wealth. However, we would like to change. We would like to kind of set this into the opposite position. So if I don't have enough material wealth, and if I am poor, then this will naturally lead to the result that I didn't have faith, I didn't do positive speech, or I didn't donate. However, minorities who really believe in God but cannot have enough wealth because of the social structure will naturally be persecuted by religious people, even though they really did have their faith, and even though they really believed in God, but can't have enough material wealth because of the social structure of South Korea. So before that, I would like to give a POI from closing.
Okay, isn't it a stretch for you to say all Christians will ignore structural problems when this prosperity is one of the factors, while their faith to God is one of the factors that account for the financial success in the world?
Well, in the religious perspective, faith of God is basically everything for these religions. So we believe that this is very important for them. This is really important and the number one crucial factor for them as well. So moving on. So we're going to talk about next the salvation of the minorities and why the social structure of South Korea is. And we're going to adapt the social structure of South Korea into this argument. So basically, the social structure of South Korea is hierarchical, and we have a common belief that if in order to succeed, you have to go to law school, you have to go to med school, and that's basically the way to prosperity. However, this is a structure that must be solved. And in order to save those minorities, we have to actually change the social structure. However, we believe that instead of turning the blame to the social structure, we will actually turn the blame to the minorities' religious beliefs. So we will actually turn the blame into saying that you were minorities because you didn't believe in God enough, and that's the reason why you are being poor in the status quo. We believe that this is completely unfair for these minorities because they were currently being hindered by the social structure of South Korea. So proud to propose.
1 second. Right. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for your speech. I welcome to the podium the leader of our opposition whenever you're ready.
Am I audible?
Yep, all good.
Pronouns are she and her. Prefer to take POI the chat, please. That starts. Time starts in 3, 2, 1. Without the prosperity gospel, South Korea would not have been able to be the country it is today. That value proud to stand on side opposition. As leader of opposition, I'm going to do 3 things. Firstly, characterize the status quo on my side. Secondly, rebut some of the Prime Minister's points. Lastly, provide you with our first argument regarding the comparative. So firstly, what does the status quo look like in South Korea? We know that South Korea was not the country it is today back in the 50s and 60s. So back in the 1950s and 1960s, South Korea is an extremely poor developing country suffering from the aftermath of the Korean War that lived off of support from the United States of America. But then 70s and 80s, South Korea experienced extremely rapid, successful processes of urbanization and industrialization that made it become the OECD nation, that made it become one of the richest Asian countries in the world, that made it stand out from other Southeast Asian countries, that made it possess advanced technology despite having very little natural minerals or natural resources to profit off of. We think that this process was made possible because of the significant role of religion, specifically Protestant religion, because the dominant religion in South Korea, believed by most of the South Korean people, is Christianity, and because this dominant religion was used by Protestant pastors, where they use their religious leverage to incorporate the goodness of material wealth and positive health, unlike opening government characterization. So we think that it's not just basically like pastors in the status quo were like, oh, if you believe in God or if you just give a lot of money to God, you'll get rich. That's not really how religion works in South Korea, right? These pastors actually emphasize things like the Protestant work ethic, like hard work, thrift, and efficiency, in order to actually practice and gain wealth efficiently and actually maintain physical health. We're going to prove to you why this has actually done more good than harm, and it's definitely not something to regret at the end of the day on the comparative. So before we move on, let's look at some of the points made by the Prime Minister. Firstly, they talk about like the rigid hierarchical structure of South Korea and how like descending of wealth has happened very commonly. But they really like failed to mechanize this point, right? It's extremely unclear why the prosperity gospel itself is the blame of this phenomenon, rather than the combination of other non-religious factors like globalization or late-stage capitalism. We think that the prosperity gospel has simply played a role in ushering people to work hard, and that being wealthy and healthy is good. And we think that it's unclear how this prosperity gospel has ushered like a rigid hierarchical structure and like systemic and systematic problems within South Korea, because there was like an utterly missing logical linkage coming from the Prime Minister's speech. And then they talk about minorities, right? And they talk about like how minorities are going to be harmed under the prosperity gospel, right? But we think that that's actually not the case. Like we reject this premise, right? Because the prosperity gospel pushes forward the narrative that being healthy and wealthy is good, right? So without this narrative, we think that the predominantly Christian Korean people, and especially Korean minorities, would have even less of an incentive to work hard and gain material wealth to escape their financial status, and they would have less ambition to climb up the social ladder. They would have less ambition to earn money through whatever means possible to gain material wealth and survive and adopt. So we think that this is what has actually helped these minorities, I said through chat, less hindered by social structures, and we think that this successfully flips PM's mechanism on minorities and will be extended further in my first argument. And then lastly, we think that there's points on materialism being exacerbated in South Korea. Firstly, we think that there's enough check and balance mechanisms existing in the status quo, because right now we think that South Korea has reached a stable, significant enough level of development that the South Korean society as a whole, including Christians and non-Christians, is fully aware of this phenomenon of materialism and social structures. So society as a whole has enough incentive not to exacerbate this to a significant extent. And secondly, it's really difficult for Prime Minister to argue, and government bench as a whole to argue that all Christians don't care or don't know about the hierarchical social structure of South Korea, and that like this prosperity gospel is the entire blame of this phenomenon, right? And thirdly, we think that this is a lot, even if you don't buy the 2 points that I've just mentioned, the Protestant work ethic and like the prosperity gospel, we think, is the healthiest option to actually buttress this phenomenon of gaining wealth, because what other things like movies like The Wolf of Wall Street or radical songs by rappers glorifying and glamorizing money on their comparative, we think would be significantly less sustainable, less healthy, and less ethical to begin with. And before I move on, I'll take a POI from closing.
Do you understand that there might be people like who cannot even lift themselves up because of this
Yes,
social structure, and therefore like they would blame God on themselves?
Okay, yes. So that said, moving on to the first argument regarding the comparative. So we think that without prosperity gospel on the comparative, we don't think that South Korea would have been able to achieve exponential development, right? So why is this the case? We're going to mechanize this point further. We think that without the narrative that being healthy and wealthy is a good thing, we think that the predominantly Christian Korean people would have been less ambitious as a whole to garner material wealth, right? So that this would have mean that they would have less ambitious to get out of the poverty state of the 50s and 60s of the Korean War, where they're literally living off of the help of the United States, right? So we think that without this like Protestant work ethic and without this kind of ideology and narrative that garnering material wealth is good, we think that workers in South Korea as a whole, who are predominantly Christian, would have been less inclined to work harder. So there would naturally be less profit generated for companies because workers work less harder. And we think that there would have been more people being laid off and unemployed, especially during financial crises that South Korea has historically suffered from, like the IMF or the 2008 housing bubble or economic recession, where the South Korean community largely depended on religion and this narrative of the prosperity gospel to actually survive, to actually adapt and actually gain more material wealth through whatever means possible. We think that without this kind of like psychological consolation and strong narrative gripping the South Korean society, South Korea as a whole would not be able to achieve the exponential economic growth path. And for difficult times like the IMF or 2008 housing bubble, more companies would have gone bankrupt, and the rate of consumption and overall economic growth would have been much, much slower. So why is this a bad thing? Because on the comparative, we see that without this kind of exponential development and extreme desire to
Leader of opposition, the speaker froze. I'll stop the timer. All right. So I think it was around 5:40-ish when the speaker froze. Maybe you can start 20 seconds before. 5:30 around. So the last thing I heard was, without getting support from South Korea, I won't be able to solve the financial crisis, etc.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Sorry for the technological difficulties. I'll resume my time in 3, 2, 1. So we think that without this kind of like extreme inclination for workers to work hard and generate more profits for companies, when it comes to economic crises like IMF, where the South Korean community depended on religion and Protestantism for psychological consolation, more companies would have gone bankrupt. The rate of consumption by the Korean community and overall economic growth would have been much slower. And why is this a bad thing? Because on the comparative, the standard of living would be much lower, and South Korea would still be like a slum, like a developing country, right? So the average citizen in South Korea would not be able to enjoy similar standards of life that they're enjoying today. So being able to shop at large supermarkets, being able to buy easily imported goods, fast transportation, clean water, these things would have taken much, much longer for South Korea to accomplish without the narrative that being healthy and wealthy is a good thing. And South Korea would not be the nation it is. It would be like a little peninsula that Western nations still don't take seriously, right? And also because physical well-being also isn't taken as seriously in the comparative, we think that health and hygiene practices would be much worse off. And we think that this is an exclusive reason why religion is the most sustainable and safest and most harmless ideology possible, especially with Christianity being one of the most significant religions, right? So we think of things like financial blessing and physical well-being being valued through like non-violent practices like faith that provides the individual with psychological consolation, or like positive speech that enables better communication with both non-religious and religious individuals that are connected with whatever believer that there is in question, and donations to religious causes that Korean churches not only use for big churches but also use to run lucrative charity centers that actually help the South Korean community as a whole. We think that because we have been able to prove to you why the comparative is better off, more than Pastor opposed.
One second. Judges, all good. Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for your speech. I welcome to the podium Deputy Prime Minister. Please keep in mind that POI preferences of the speaker and make sure to follow this for other debaters in the room. Deputy Prime Minister, whenever you're ready, we can send it.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
Thank you. I don't have preferred gender pronouns, and I would like to accept POIs via chat. Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So mainly two things I'm going to do in my speech. First, I'm going to give out some rebuttals about what the previous speaker had mentioned, and next I'm going to give out comparatives and tell you why the government's bench took this debate home. First of all, we deeply regret the fact that the LO came up to the podium and just spent about like 5 minutes about how South Korea was able to develop it and industrialize in the past because of the work ethic of this prosperity gospel. We deeply regret this because we believe that there wasn't a clear link between how only the religious belief of individuals and how their work ethic related to this prosperity gospel was able to be the core reason for prosperity. We believe that there needs to be more mechanism and logical links in order for the opposition side to prove that that is the core and core reason for this prosperity that Korea was able to gain. Because we believe that in the state of economic recession and the IMF or right after the Korean War, just as the Yellow mentioned herself, we believe that in that current state where everyone is suffering from poverty or whatnot, we believe that those people's need to solve urgent basic needs, like what they should eat the next day, we believe that those kind of those kind of factors are going to be much more drive them forward to work hard. We believe that there's going to be other factors as well, and therefore we believe that it is the burden of the opposition side to prove why it is especially work ethic that's provided by the Catholic by the Christianity religion that was able to lead to our prosperity of the current status quo. And B, even if we do bite the bullet and say and accept the fact that yes, work ethic did lead to Korea's prosperity, we believe that that was important in the past, where Korea was in was suffering from poverty or what to eat the next day or whatnot. We believe that that was more important in the past, but but we actually passed past those stage, and we're now in a stage where there's a significant development of economy existing right now in the current status quo. So we believe that in the current status quo and in the current status quo of South Korea, where there is already a certain level of prosperity in the whole nation, and where there is, as our PM already mentioned, where there is a rigid hierarchy of and a rigid gap between the rich and the poor, we believe that those kinds of problems are much more detrimental to our society in the current status quo, and therefore those problems are the ones that should be focused in this debate when we're talking about. Now, with this said, I would like to go over to the comparatives that we mentioned in this debate and show you why we should regret the dominance of the prosperity gospels in South Korea. So as our PM had already mentioned, we believe that it is important to notice that this prosperity gospel itself makes individual reliant on religion and to the faith of God, because they believe that faith and positive speech and donations to religious causes are going to be the direct cause for their increase in material wealth. In order for the opposition side to say that work ethic is derived from this prosperity gospel, they need to provide us to a link between why that is going to directly lead to the work ethics, while the prosperity gospel main focus is that financial blessing and physical well-being is always the will of God. We believe that that is very important in understanding the prosperity of gospel, because saying that there's always going to be a blessing from the God means that it will make people more inclined to see not to see the world as it, but to see of it as a blessing from God. So see it as in a pink filter, which they have to receive, have to take for granted, because it is what God provided to them. We believe that is the detrimental factor from the prosperity gospel, because it stops people from questioning why the social structure is like the status quo, why they are poor even if they work hard or whatnot. We believe that is a most important harm of this prosperity gospel in the current status quo. Therefore, we believe that in the individual level, this prosperity gospel itself makes people believe that only the faith to God, or believing that God will God will have salvation for you if you rely on Him, or if you have if you give out donations to the church or whatnot. We believe that that narrative itself make people more rely on just accepting the world as it is, as what God gave to you in the first place. We believe that is the most detrimental factor of this narrative. And whether in our comparative, where we don't have this narrative, we believe that people are more going to be independent from the religion itself, and they're going to focus on their own social structure that they are surrounded in, and how they're focusing on their work or whatnot. We believe that will be rather work as a much more effective factor to drive their work ethic, because there is a direct cause and effect that it's visible without the pink filter that this prosperity gospel provides to them. Now, with the individual level said, now I'm going to move on to how we're going to be accepting the minorities before that POICO.
So isn't it comparatively better under our side, because rich people still have an incentive to donate and the church uses it for like food stamps or whatnot?
we believe that donations are majorly like superficial solutions for this rigid social structure that we already mentioned in our PN speech, because that's not trying to diagnose the core cause of the problem, and it's also justifying the rich for the money that they have. For instance, like the 재벌 problems in the Korean status quo, we believe that those kind of rigid social structure that actually keeps away poor people from climbing up the ladder. We believe that the prosperity gospel can be a justification for this rigid structure, to accept it all as the God's blessing. It's like it's your problem of being immoral in the religious perspective or whatnot. We believe that that narrative is rather going to make only like superficial solutions like donations exist in the current status quo. So moving on to the minorities, as we believe that is detrimental in two levels. First of all, it's going to be making a bias on the minorities, because people in poverty are going to be viewed as immoral in the point of view of Christians, because if you converse what the info site reads, people without material wealth are going to be blamed that they're not going to have that they're not having enough faith for religion, when we believe that those kind of emphasis on faith can't solve the core problem of the social structure, and will only frame the minorities as people who don't have enough faith for God, therefore proud to propose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for your speech. I welcome to the podium Deputy Leader of Opposition to start the debate whenever they can.
Just a second, please. Okay, please make your POI through chat. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. I would like to first start off by rebutting a few points made by the opening government. So the Prime Minister had mentioned that if the prosperity gospel is because of the prosperity gospel, people are more likely, poor people are more likely to shift their blame of being poor, to shift their blame of being poor to religion rather than their incapabilities. And should I stop my speech?
Sorry, I didn't start the timer. Do you want to restart? If you have your own timer, could continue as well.
I'll restart for the sake of POI timing. Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So I'd like to start off my speech by rebutting a few points made by the opening government. So first, the Prime Minister had mentioned that through the prosperity gospel, it is more likely that people who are poor will shift their blame of them being economically impoverished from their incapabilities and their lack of effort into trying to get out of these economic impoverishedness, rather than and shifting it that to the religion. However, I believe that this point actually works to our benefit, and that it is not an exclusive harm, because if you think about it, it will actually bring more confidence and belief in their own capabilities for these people, right? If in the poor people's perspective, if you feel like in this desperate situation, there's no way that despite your efforts and despite your capabilities, you have no way you can get out of this poverty cycle. Through this prosperity gospel, it will actually suggest to these impoverished people that it is not because of their incapabilities and it is not because of their lack of effort, but rather it is because of their lack of faith in religion and whatnot. So actually, it works better for the mindset of these economically impoverished to actually believe in their incapabilities, in their capabilities and their efforts, that they can get out of this economic impoverishedness. And second of all, the DPM had mentioned that this prosperity gospel could have had an impact in Korea a few decades ago, but it is not applicable right now because Korea is a developed country and that people are better off. However, that totally contradicts to your PM, how your PM has characterized the Korean society in the current status quo, which is where there is rigid hierarchical society and there is economic inequality between the rich and the poor, right? So the prosperity gospel is still applicable because it is true that there are still a lot of economically impoverished people that feel like that in reality and in practical terms can't get out of this poor impoverished state because of this rigid capitalistic Korean society that is in place right now. So in the comparative under government's world, where this narrative of prosperity theology does not exist, there will be no effective enough ideology or incentive in the Korean society context that can collectivize the South Korean people and give hope to these people that are in difficult economic situations, these minorities, to continue their lives despite these economic hardships, which will at the end help them acquire material wealth through the motivation in the course of living. And I will later on explain why worth ethic and this prosperity theology is related. So in order to win over the opposition bench, the government has to prove what narrative other than this theology can be more effective than the prosperity theology that could have pulled Korea out of its major economic recessions and still motivate the impoverished people against these rigid social structures. So the importance in the prosperity gospel is not in the logical sense that it makes people actually believe in God giving them material wealth, right? Rather, the important part of this idea is that it makes people believe that with this religion, they will be able to get out of whatever cycle of poverty or economic hardships they have right now, and that it will get better in the future. I'm sorry, in the future, because especially in the South Korean society where social mobility is rigid and acquiring wealth from the very bottom economic social class is very, very difficult, as the opening government had agreed to be true, in the perspective of the impoverished, regardless of whether efforts they put in, how much they try, whatever they do, they will think and believe that there is no way for them to get out of this despairing situation, right? They have no motivation to continue their life. What this prosperity theory in fact does then, that it gives these minorities that are bashed and ignored by hierarchical and capitalistic South Korean economic social structure a motivation to actually carry on their lives despite the reality that seems unescapable. And also responding to the DPM's unfair burdening, we as side opposition don't have to prove that work ethic is exclusively the factor that helped minorities or led to prosperity, because this is a this house regrets motion. All we have to prove is that the prosperity gospel has done in this sense more harm than good and not something to regret, which our LO had already dressed upon. So the national social economic level, the prosperity gospel induces much more positive impacts on the main stakeholder the opening government has identified, which were Korean minorities who are economically weak. Because under the same difficult situation, it gives those who believe in this religion at least the mental belief and hope to carry on, continue their lives, receive government aid, be educated, look for jobs and whatnot, which will at the end result in more material wealth than under your world where people don't have this hope or motivation to carry on their lives and actually be motivated to do whatever that might have the possibility to help them acquire material wealth or get out of this poverty cycle in the first place. Yes, we bite the bullet that believing this religion does not guarantee every single person who are poor in the South Korean society that believing in Christianity to be economically better off, right? But compared to the government's world where people stagnate and just believe that there is no other way to get out of this impoverished cycle, under our world, it has much more probability of people being economically better off because they have an incentive with this religion to carry on their lives. And the DPM had also, yes, your point of information from
your world is looking at the world in a distorted way where religion overshadows the social structure. However, in our world, we're directly facing those social structure. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, you didn't really recognize how without this theology under your world will better off the minorities in the first place, and how that will actually lead to people being more critical or actually bringing tangible impacts and changing the structures or the fundamental rigid structures of the Korean society, right? And you also mentioned that donations are superficial and does not solve the root cause of rigid social structures. But then where prosperity gospel and donations does not exist in your world, isn't that still worse than our world, where we at least have these donations despite corrective structures to help the poor in the first place? And especially because in the current society, Christianity is such a majority religion, and the organizations are so strong. The donations that these Christianity organizations actually collect have a major impact in helping the social economic class. And you have to prove why, without this prosperity gospel, it will actually be in the favor of minorities, economic impoverished minorities. And because we believe that under our world, these economically impoverished poor people will be better off due to motivation and because of actual tangible donations, we believe that we take this debate home. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for your speech. I think the panel is ready as well. We can close the opening half and please proceed to the closing half. Welcome to the podium, member of the government, whenever you're ready.
I just have 1 second, please. Okay, so my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, before I move on to our unique contributions, let's first talk about the OO's arguments, right? So we think that OO's arguments are just basically 2 points, right? People are going to be less ambitious without this kind of narrative, and it at least can actually give somehow people hope in the first place. I give it 2 responses, right? Firstly, people are anyway going to be ambitious in the society, but they are anyway going to have incentives to actually live better lives without even prosperity gospel, right? They really want to have some kind of pasta, or they really want to have some kind of steak. Their human instinct and drive to actually become better people and to live in like better environments and standings would actually make them be more ambitious even without this kind of prosperity gospel in the first place, right? And because people's natural instinct is to actually gain some kind of recognition from our people, that's why even without this kind of narrative, people will be somehow incentivized to actually live better lives in the first place, right? Second thing they talk about is that, oh, we at least can somehow give hope and expectation for people. Okay, in the short term, it can actually somehow work because it can actually stimulate people. But the long term, if these people who are actually believing this narrative, they don't really see anything changing, anything achieving in the first place, they are just going to be in like a continuous state of having desperate lives in the first place, right? Also, as the opening government has actually noted, that because the rigid hierarchy exists in the first place, and these low-income people know that this rigid hierarchy exists in the first place, and they really are going to expect that nothing is really going to change, then they'll feel like they are just betrayed by religions, right? Because I mean, for these people, for these desperate living people, they are only going to think that religion is like the one and only mental asylum for themselves. But then they will feel like they are betrayed by their one and only mental asylum, which is going to be very negatively affecting these people in the first place. So let's talk about unique contributions, right? Before I talk about unique contributions, I would like to give you a counter model, counterfactual better than the OG, right? We think that we will actually promote other kinds of Christian doctrine that does not put an emphasis on well-being and material prosperity, but rather we are going to promise a better life in the afterlife in heaven, because no promise is going to really happen in the real life. It's just that people's expectation and people's hope is just not really lead to like realistic, some kind of gainings or benefit in the first place, right? We think that we can actually give you some kind of unique points, right? Firstly, it's going to this narrative is actually going to distort the meaning of religion in the first place, right? Religion is supposed to be somehow distant from secularized society, right? However, with this kind of narrative, religions can actually give people who are not even a religion some kind of wrong image of religions, that Christianity is not just different from society, right? Because people by actually somehow listening to this kind of narrative will feel like religion as some kind of investment, it's some kind of economic investment. If they actually put time into like the religion, they think that they are going to gain some kind of thing later. And the thing is, people who are not even believing in these religions are going to be feeling disillusioned because they are not really going to see religions as different from the society, right? And it's like a short-term effect. And let's talk about the long-term effect in the first place. right? Because people are just going to perceive, especially Christianity, as like a method to be rich in the first place, right? And we think that is going to harm the intent of religion itself. And because people should originally believe in religions, truly to believe in God and to be guided by some kind of God's principle. But then some people are just going to be rich, and because they just want to be rich, they are just going to be believing in God, which means that these people who are believing in God because of this narrative is just going to have shallow belief in God, which is not really good for society, because if they feel like there are no blessings given to them, they are just going to leave religions anyway. Let's talk about the individuals, right? We think that this narrative is actually going to prevent individuals from enjoying immediate pleasure and benefit in the first place, right? Because this narrative forces people to actually sacrifice immediate happiness and wealth for unexpected gain, right? This narrative is going to be very ineffective to actually persuade our people. As right now, just think about, like, rationally, people would think that, oh, if we actually buy goods and services, we can surely get some kind of expected benefits. But then what this narrative is saying is that, okay, if you guys just donate all money, then you are just going to get benefits anyway. In like a long term, which cannot really be like expected benefit. It's only going to give some kind of unrealistic, unachievable hope and dream, and people are not really going to be somehow persuaded by that kind of narrative in the first place, right? And we think that is very detrimental for the individuals to be affected by this, right? Because this narrative is only going to make people have unrealistic hope that they will be sometime in their life would be receiving God's blessing in return if they got to like donate money or use money for good purposes, right? But then the thing is, they cannot really be guaranteed that some kind of God's blessing can just be in return just because they actually use money for like humanitarian purposes or donations, because reality is just different from some kind of expectation and imagination, right? And then some people, although they really donate money a lot, but then they will be experiencing economic hardships, and if they see like nothing is changing, they're just going to think that they are still not getting God's blessings, although they are actually contributing a lot to like God's principles and like God's activities in the first place, right? And they're just going to be thinking that, oh, although we are actually putting a lot of money into like the donations, they are just going to feel that they are not even still God's children in the first place, right? Which is going to lead to people being disillusioned, as God is not really giving blessings, although they are actually somehow participating in donation in the first place, right? It's actually going to lead people to actually lose faith in God, and it's going to be very detrimental for the church membership, right? Because church is actually going to lose its members because people are going to be somewhat disillusioned toward the religion and toward Christianity. That's why they are going to be living church. That's not going to be good for a church. I'll take from O.
If poor people feel like the religion doesn't work because of the theology, doesn't that mean that people will in turn give up religion and put more efforts in the real world? And isn't that better under our world?
But then, but then even still, like in reality, economic activities, they really cannot, expect some kind of guaranteed benefit. That's why it's not even going to work in your side. And the thing is, this narrative is only going to force people to pour money into the church, right? Which is not going to be very, very good, because this narrative actually makes people donate money and use for like humanitarian purposes, right? But then the thing is, these money is actually going to be used for low-income people, right? Because if we talk about like the basic characters of low-income people, they are rather going to be using that money for some kind of like basic necessities, not for like economic activities or investments that will actually stimulate national economy in the first place, right? Also, low-income people are not really going to join complicated economic activities that can actually stimulate the national economy and actually can bring some kind of like economic externalities to the national economy in the first place. It's not really going to create a lot of economic benefit. Then people using that money for like the national economy, like investments or some kind of like other sources of economic activity in the first place, right? We think that also because the religions actually have this kind of social expectation that religion should not really be participating in some kind of investments or like social products or those kind of things. That's why churches, because of social expectations, would not really be able to buy some kind of assets or would not really be actively participating in like financial activities with this kind of money from people who are actually donating or donating to churches. And because of all these reasons, we think that this narrative is only going to give detrimental effect to our society. And because of all these reasons, we think that we should take this faith home. Thanks.
Thank you, member of the government. 1 second. All right. Thank you, member of the government, for your speech. I think panel is also good to go. Member of the opposition, whenever you're ready, welcome to the podium.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yep, all good.
Great. Okay. I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. What is the utility of religion anyways? We believe it's providing solace to individuals who need it the most, and it doesn't need to be devout and loyal and pure as the CG tries to say. This was translated to material success in Korea because of two characteristics. First, because Korea was a very capitalistic society that valued your material success a lot. And second, belief in a class mobility after the Korean War, right? Because there wasn't a rigid aristocrat or hierarchy, a lot of people wanted to class mobility. We enter this debate by providing you a simple but effective extension, a counterfactual, and a more realistic portrayal of how South Korea was up to this point from the past and to the current. OD tries to give an argument about people attribute wealth with faith, and therefore there's less social change in the society overall, which was already provided by the O, that people are not so gullible as OD tries to say. If they really wanted this argument to have impact, at the end of the day, they needed to prove how a-religious people also buy this narrative so much that social change from any side of the society cannot happen, but also societal change is people from the religion themselves see this in a more long-term perspective, and they also see that their social status is prescripted to them right now. That's the reason why they want something to believe in, right? Because something to change their current status. So we think that their characteristic of these religious people being so idiotic, as they try to say, is boxed out from the beginning. And O tries to give us an argument about how economic growth period from the 50s and 60s in South Korea was due to this narrative. But we do think that work ethic is a part of religion, but their impact was a bit too much of a stretch when they tried to attribute all of these things. When there's for example, how Park Geun-hye administration was able to navigate well through economic policies, or export-led growth was also a reason why Korea was able to succeed, right? Say that their impact and their arguments were a bit of a stretch, and we're going to give you a more realistic but effective contribution to this debate. And going to my extension about my counterfactual is directly going to engage into CG, who gave a slightly realistic but still lacking a contribution to this debate compared to us. CG briefly talk about CG. Mainly said two things about the afterlife, how that's going to be better in the counterfactual in their world, and second, how people can get disillusioned. Two brief responses. First, this afterlife belief is not exclusive in our world. Note this fact, because we say that religion is going to be there's going to be a religious motivation in your current life and afterlife too. So that I don't get why that's unique contribution. But second, we say that that's less tangible because you literally have to die in order to get your and then see where you're going to go, to hell or heaven. We say that provides less motivation to people to find solace and utility in religion. And second, they say that this is going to lead to disillusionment and people are going to have a shallow belief in God. But note that they never characterized to us why this is a harm in the first place. They just took it as granted. We believe that people do not have to be, for example, coming from a Christian family of 3 or 4 generations, and they need to believe in religion, even if they don't think it gives any utility to them. We believe that if people can find what they want, if they can find purpose in religion, we see that that's what a theology, what religion should do. We say they haven't proved to us why people need to get utility from this, even if they don't believe, they don't see any material or financial success benefits coming to them. Now let's move on to our extension. First is about our counterfactual. We give you 3 things. What are churches likely to emphasize and take advantage of if this narrative was non-existent? We say 3 things. First is predestination, the Calvinistic emphasis on how your position and your life is already predetermined even before the moment you are born. Second is about unconditional faith, and third is about a fear mechanism. What is this? First, we say that it's most likely go back to the Calvinistic ages where humble life and predestination was emphasized. That is to say, some people are damned and saved from the beginning, and no matter what you do, your current life isn't going to be changed it's going to be even after your next or next life for anything to change. We say that this kind of thing provides less motivation and less help to the people on the ground who need something to believe in from the first place. Second, we also say that churches, because they don't have a strong incentive to pull people, right? We say that churches, unlike what they say, are still going to want to have believers. They still want supporters who are able to have their church operate, right? We say that then what they're going to have is, because they don't have this moderate but effective pull factor of financial success. Later, and Tat, please. We say that it's most likely going to happen through emphasizing unconditional faith to your superior, or for example, the preacher that you see on every Sunday. We say that those kind of things are more likely to lead to these belief in individual figures, charismatic figures, or the unconditional faith, which we think is much unhealthier for religious organizations and to the believers as well. Third, we say that they're going to use a fear mechanism. That is to say, if you don't do this, that you're going to go, you're never going to be able to become rich. You're going to go to hell. We say that those kind of negative forces are more likely to be existent if this positive reinforcements, it cannot be happening in their world. And therefore, we say that at the end of the day, religion is the unique thing that can give all of these things, and the counterfactuals are much worse off. What will people do? And before I talk about what people will likely to do, I'll take a POI from closing.
Okay, but then this narrative always connect like churches to like the secular society. People are just going to feel disillusioned toward church because they really see no difference from church to secular society.
Okay. I think I already dealt this from the beginning. We don't get why the church has to be something as unsecular from the beginning, but also we say that what people do if they don't have narrative will be worse off. Let me elaborate. There are always going to be people who are desperate and feel in need. That is to say, people who do go pray before Sunung. People, desperate moms who want to send their kids to a good university. Those things that the unique core people are not going to change. Those stakeholders are going to go to worse off places like gambling or having to this more dangerous institutions that do not actually have a common ideology that is actually unifying them. We say that the counterfactuals are much worse off in CG's worlds. Please elaborate. Now let's move on to why we are able to combat the Haejoseon narrative that exists in South Korea and its negative things that never give any hope to the people. That is to say, we say emotional comfort in religion is something that is unique contribution. As we already told you, we say that there's motivation given from religion to motivation that is translated into motivation in your secular life is something that is actually a very positive benefit. Protestant ethnic roots translate into reward of capitalism, and we see that working hard, believing hard, and also contributing to the organization that you're a part of. We don't get why that's something a really bad thing. So that is to say, if you think that churches need to help out the most people at the end of the day, please vote for CO. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, member of the opposition, for your speech. I think the panel is ready to go as well. Welcome to the podium, Government Whip, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Before I go, POI in the chat. With that in mind, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that both CO and OO has failed to characterize what is the world that we are living today and why this will not work. And we will further elaborate on that. First of all, it is understandable that all of us, right, like no matter like which social standing that we are, like which part of the world we're living in, all of us in this material like will suffer from some kind of suffering. Okay, the loss of a child, cancer, or like just like natural disaster. So in their world, right, they will think that like the people, they will think that like they don't work hard enough, they don't have enough faith, and therefore they're being punished by the God. That is like the situation. Or like, for example, if like for some reason you become like poor, for example, the people on their side of the world will think that they don't have enough faith, they don't have like enough understanding of Christianity, and they will just blame themselves. Or even they see that like they already have faith in God, right? But like God is not like keeping his promise, and they will just turn away from church. And that is the word that they are pursuing today. But what is our counterfactual look like? Our counterfactual, we will not promise anything in this life. We will not promise anything in this like material life, right? But rather we promise a better understanding, a better standing in heaven. And why is this important? First of all, we think that this is the ultimate goal of every single religion, and that is like the reason why like people join churches at the first place. And they talk about like how like material life and like momentary pleasure is like important. But then what is more important if like you really waited like to live like 50 years, 100 years of happy life in this life, or to live in eternity in heaven? And therefore we believe that it in and of itself, our model is enough of an incentive for people to do good work at the first place. But second of all, I think both CO and OO fall into this narrative that this will bring a lot of like economic prosperity and like make people do hard work. So two levels of analysis to it. First of all, let's look at other countries. Let's look at Japan, for example. They have all the characteristics that OO was trying to pursue. They have like, they don't really have much like of like natural resources. They also gain prosperity from a period of economic recession. But like, does this like prosperity gospel prevail in Japan at the first place, like in that time? No, it isn't, but rather it's through hard work, it's through like effective policy, and even like it's through the culture of hard work that leveraged Japan from the first place. And that is a lot of the characteristic that is also present in South Korea. But second of all, right, if you read this motion again, you will see that this only emphasis about faith, positive speech, and donation, not about hard work. And why does that mean, right? So we can like separate this. The thing that prosperity theory is trying to pursue is like, first of all, belief in God does not lead to hard work. Second of all, positive speech does that lead to hard work? No, and like donation to church that don't even lead to hard work. And furthermore, right, people will believe that from all these things, like they can gain material wealth. Therefore, they will refrain themselves from economic activities that actually can gain them wealth. And therefore, we believe that the narrative that OO and that both OO and CEO is extremely harmful. But then again, therefore, we believe that we outweigh the whole opposition side. But then again, let's gain a deeper look into OO, right, and see where their like argument fall down. So first of all, we already tell them like how like their like narrative of like South Korea used to be poor, and because of this like transformation to wealth, because of this religion. And we think that even like CO don't believe that with that and directly knife them. And it is like the only like contribution that they can bring and the only impact. And if we take this out of the equation, their case fall down. But then let's see from CO. Okay, so first of all, they tell us just likely to emphasize Calvinism, and we believe that it is not like the only like alternative to like it's like not only the only alternative to this like prosperity gospel, right? And we believe that they are trying to push it to like the extreme extent that everyone will be a Calvinist if like there is like not prosperity gospel at the first place. So we believe that, for example, like Catholic, right? They also emphasize like good work. They also emphasize like faith, but rather they promise for a better life in heaven, not like the better life in like the reality and like economic success in reality. And therefore, we believe that, first of all, this counterfactual is not correct and it fall down. But second of all, they talk about like how there will be like a fear mechanism on our side, right? But even there also a fear mechanism on your side, because like if you read the motion and even like the doctrine of like prosperity gospel equally, you go easily, using simple logic, you will easily imagine the counterfactual if you not do what like the church tell you, right? You will be like living in poverty, you will be like you cannot lift yourself from the social economic world that you're living in, and therefore we believe that is extremely harmful on your side. So therefore, take separate hard work from this. Therefore, we have successfully separated hard work, which both of the team trying to pursue so much out of this equation. And also we have, even if we assume that hard work is true, we have taken it down from the equation and believe that from the example that we provide and from all of the alternatives that we provide, that is not important in the first place. And even if it's contribute to like the government and to like the economic prosperity, this only contribute to like a minimum amount. I cannot outweigh the harm that we provide. But then again, let's see how our case differentiate from OG. Okay, so OG, we think that so both OG and OO, they fall into the narrative of minority, and they only see this case on like it's already out of order, I assume, and they only see the case from the from the narrative of like the minority, right? And therefore we believe that this has made their case extremely sufficient. Furthermore, we are the one who provide with a counterfactual, a counter model, and like the alternative to this that can break down all of the benefit of OO and CO about like the encouragement to work hard and like to contribute to society, because on our side, we can also contribute to society, but rather than being promised with an unrealistic prosperity in material life, we rather provide them with a much sustainable benefit that is easier to prove on the side of the church. And we also, on our side, we're successfully bringing a lot of factors in our society, right? We have bring in the economy on a macro level and see how people pouring money in church will refrain them from participating in constructive economic activity. But also, we analyze this from an individual level. And our analysis can be applied to both the rich and the poor. But furthermore, we show that how this can harm the benefit of the church and how this will drive people away from the church in the first place. I rest my case.
Thank you, Government Whip, for your speech. I think panels are ready as well. I welcome the voting the last speaker of the opposition bench. Opposition Whip, whenever you're ready, you can start the speech.
Am I audible? Sorry for that. Am I audible?
Yep. Can you say something else as well, just to double check?
Yes. Am I clearly audible?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, I'm getting my timer. Okay, I'm starting my speech in 3. I think that the first contribution coming from the closing opposition is we provide to you who is most likely to be affected by this narrative in the status quo, and why is it effective to those people and so crucial to those people who actually need it, right? And I think that this is where the opening half falls out of this debate, because they simply assert that it affects everyone in the society by bringing massive changes within the social structure. I think that in order for them to prove that, they need to mechanize why this narrative is likely to be so dominant to the degree that it affects everybody living in the society as to policy changes or whatnot. I think that we bring you the unique framing that this affects the people who believe in religion the most and who are most vulnerable and most desperate to actually opt into this narrative. And we also prove to you why it provides the unique solace and unique happiness that these people need to be provided at the end of the day. So we think that we win on this point. The first thing I want to talk about is to compare CG's case and our case, because I think that our case and CG's case was implicitly engaging, right? Because the closing government comes up here and says that now people are going to be disillusionized, because the point at which they notice the fact that they can't earn money, even though they pray and have faith, they're going to be angry at the religion because this isn't the case, right? The first thing I would say here is that notice the fact that usually the people who hold beliefs in religious institutions have long-term beliefs, right? This means that these people don't hold the beliefs that if they pray for one time, they will suddenly earn $100 and whatnot. I would say that the reason why these people opt into these beliefs is because they have long-term beliefs. They are very desperate because they are facing a difficult situation, usually very vulnerable in these cases, and they need a string to hold on to. They need this sense of hope that they can live a better life, or they can have some hope to overcome their difficulties that they are facing in the status quo, right? And I think that this is very important because of a couple of reasons you won't already elaborated. Because firstly, I think that this makes religion much more accessible, countering the claim that CG gave us, because CG simply asserts this idea of this weird purity of religion, right? And they say that, devoted following is good. People simply opting in because of the material gains is bad. I don't think that this is a bad thing. I would rather say that this is a bad thing. Why is this? Because I think that religion is there to provide solace and comfort to the people who need that religion the most. So if vulnerable people think that they want to gain these form of solace and comfort through religion, I would say that these people opting into religion easily is actually something that is fundamental to the function of religion initially, initially, and this is a good thing, right? Then I want to elaborate a little more about solis because I think that the closing government completely ignores this. I think that unlike the opening opposition, who simply asserts that suddenly these people will be so motivated and have huge economic gains, I don't think that they never recognize this firstly, but I think that we're taking the even if case here because I don't think like even if all cases don't lead to huge economic growth, I'm going to tell you why this form of solace is the most important thing in this debate. Firstly, I think the process in which you consult God and consult your difficulties to a being that is higher up to you and have the hope that you can gain material gain if you have faith is very, very good to these people and provides a unique benefit, right? Because firstly, I think that it reduces the anxiety and difficulty that they have in their daily lives and the difficulties that they are facing in their daily lives. But secondly, and more importantly, faith is the only thing that these people can uniquely have autonomy over, other than the things that the social structure provides. I.e., they can't negotiate their minimal wages to their capitalistic structure. They can't change the social structure, right? But what they can do is opting into faith and believing that my life is going to be better. I think that this grants unique agency to these people at the end of the day, right? And secondly, I think that the reason why this is very, very important is our extension about what the counterfactual world looked like, because I think capitalistic structures exist in both worlds, right? And these people are still going to be desperate and are still going to live in difficult situations. The unique extension about the counterfactual that Yeon provided to you is that rather than believing in faith or opting into religions that can actually give you hope and that kind of solace, now people are going to turn to more desperate measures, right? For example, like betting their life on going to the lottery or betting their life or going to gambling because they need the money, but they do not have the money. They're going to work hard on both sides. But the meaningful difference is now because this kind of solace isn't able in a specific location called a church or a religious belief, they're now going to go to worse off situations that makes their life even harder. So I think that the meaningful comparative here is this. Like under our side, at least people have the hope and the unique solace that they can gain. So they go and pray. For example, if you're there in desperate situations, they're in monetary difficulties, they go and pray and hope for this religion. But under their side of the house, they do not have this unique mechanism that only the religious institutions are providing, thus go to more dangerous situations. I think that this is a worse off outcome for their side. Why are these people the most unique, important stakeholders in this debate? I think that it is because of two reasons. One, I think that these people are most likely to be influenced by religion in the first place, right? Because notice the fact that OG talks about filthy rich not being able to donate. I think that these people do not actually opt into this narrative as much because they're financially stable. They do not have to worry about what they would put on the table for another day. I think that these people are most influenced by this religion because these people who are actually the people who have faith. But secondly, and more importantly, I think that these people are the most vulnerable in this debate. I think that you should credit this. Then second, I want to engage with OG because the OG says that this is going to influence the social structures, thus leading to less policy changes. The first thing I would say is, in order for them to this argument to stand, they need to prove how the social structure or the policy discourse is only centered around religious beings, right? I would say this is false, right? Because South Korea isn't a religious country, right? Like political discussions within the political sphere isn't focused around religion, and not a vast majority of people believe the same monotheistic religion as they would posit. Like for example, we have the Democratic Party, we have the Republican Party. None of the discussions are focused around religion. But secondly, and more importantly, I think that this also influences the people. I think that the comparative is even worse under their side, right? Because notice the fact. CG, go. No, okay. Go. Quickly. CG, quickly.
No, but then like, so to talk about our point, but then this narrative is only going to have individuals pour money into churches, which is not really going
to. I've already told you why individuals are likely to fall into more desperate measures. And if the individuals can buy hope by donating a little bit of money, I would say that hope is worth it, because the reason why individuals buy lotteries is because they want to buy the hope, right? So I think that the comparative is under OG side is rich people are not likely to support active redistribution anyways, because they're likely to love their money, right? I think that then the meaningful comparative or the marginal benefit we get is because these rich people are more incentivized to have faith towards a religion, they are still likely to donate more, because I don't think that there's suddenly going to be liberal left people who support these things, right? I think that these people are more likely to at least donate, at least provide more money so that the churches can provide food stamps under our side of the house uniquely, because they need to have faith in order to go to heaven if they're that devoted as the OG wants to posit, because the OG's premise was that these people are so devoted to a degree that they wouldn't consider any other factors but only consider this religious factors, right? So at the end of this, I think that what is unique coming from CO is that we provide to you why we give the fundamental solace to the people who need the most. We're more than proud to oppose.
One second. All right. Thank you, member of the. Thank you, Whip, Opposition Whip, for your speech. Thank you, everyone, for the debate. I will stop the recording.